Well, hello there, drumming friends, coming to you from the balmy Queensland, Australia, 100 kilometres south of the sun. But this today is not going to be playing anything. I want to talk about something that you've heard talked about a lot. But I want to use a drummer as an example. So in this case, I'm going to talk about Tony Williams. I'm sure all of you know about Tony Williams by now. If you don't, if you're a younger dude and you don't, go check out Tony Williams. So this whole thing today is about concept. It's something that has been on my mind for a while because I felt like I didn't really have a concept, or I hadn't decided on a concept or anything. And Tony Williams was a drummer who most certainly had a defined concept, an approach and a way that he saw the instrument and how it should be played and how he felt it should be played. So this information has come from, as I'm sure a lot of you do yourselves, you study different drummers at different times. Sometimes you go backwards and forwards, and you realize that you didn't quite get it, and you go back and it starts to make more sense. So there's a few, there's not that many, but there are several, clinics on YouTube, old Tony Williams clinics and bootleg audio, and people have revitalized the audio, and which is awesome. And then you can just look to interviews, try and find interviews, written interviews or recorded video interviews. And so I would look at things like that, maybe listen to a clinic and listen to what he's talking about, and then I might go and listen to some Tony Williams or watch him play, and keep coming backwards and forwards like that a bit. And so this is just a summary now of these. This is what I picked up, and these are the pieces that I've put together, which to me is how I've interpreted the Tony Williams concept. And it's interesting, I'll get to it, I'll come back to it, how this concept has influenced so many other drummers, but who don't play like him. So you're probably familiar with, there's a clinic getting around on YouTube, and it's Tony Williams at Zildjian Day. I believe it's 1985, and he's got looks like he's a doctor or something. One of the first things he says is that when he comes across drummers, they can't do a roll, which is, a double stroke roll is what he's talking about. Now, if you think about a double stroke roll, we all would probably think of that as being something it's rudimentary, it's quite simple. But Tony Williams believed that playing the double stroke roll for extended periods of time, long periods of time, which in my world starts at around half an hour, up to an hour, you can push it, and that he wanted those doubles to sound even. So this is the first part of the concept for me in my interpretation is evenness, right? It's really hard to do. It'll probably be too loud with this microphone, but anyway. So let's just start there. Double stroke rolls and you want them to be even for a long period of time. Even meaning you want them to sound like even singles, and eventually be able to transition between singles, doubles, and paradiddles, and hopefully it's one straight line that sounds like singles. Bup, 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 bup. So there's that, right? Doubles played evenly. Another one that's included in this idea of evenness came from, there was a little series Mike Clark, the drummer Mike Clark did. It was a little 2-part series he did on Tony Williams, which you'll find on YouTube. Because Mike Clark had a little bit to do with Tony Williams, and he was, around at that time and got to see him play. And he told a story about going over to his house and yeah, how he'd heard the things that Tony would practice. And one of them was playing unisons, so all 4 limbs. Hi-hat, kick drum, both hands. And he would do that for a long, half an hour and do it as loud and as fast as he could and up and down and everything like that, right? The whole idea to keep it even and to have all the unisons landing together. And that's the exercise. So there's another aspect of this philosophy of things being even, and articulate like that. We'll get to like the technique and everything. We'll see how long this takes. It'll take as long as it takes. So then he talked. Let's just quickly cover that. So he talks about his technique, right? Where he kind of says he doesn't use any technique. And the way he described it is that everything's coming out of the hand. He's not using arms and wrist and of course these things, are naturally going to occur. You're going to use your arms to some extent playing the drums. We're talking specifically about feeling the technique in the hand. And you've heard this one before, which he talks about in that clinic where he says, being in Boston, he had the opportunity to see so many great drummers, and he started to notice a pattern, and that was that all the best drummers, in his view, tended to hold from the back of the stick, so these 2 fingers, so that became his approach. He also he talked about he didn't want to bounce the stick. And the reason he didn't want to do that is because to him it seemed kind of willy-nilly. He wanted to play every note. And at some point he made that decision throughout his playing. The way he described it, I'm always paraphrasing here, was, he wanted to have an idea and execute the idea, and for it to come out the way he intended it to. He didn't want to just throw down, which is fun, but to kind of throw down and go, oh, I hope this works, and take those types of chances. So we'll get back to this. So he would hold his sticks actually very firmly, and you can see this, and I've been a proponent of this for a long time. It really gets your technique going. We're always taught that everything's got to be super loose and all of that. But if you really want to shred your hands, also play with a white knuckle grip and try to do that, holding the stick as hard as you can. Not suggesting you would do that when you play, because you basically couldn't. But that's quite different from the whole being loose and letting everything bounce and using the rebound and this whole approach. So you've got even strokes with a firm grip, right? And you're not using fingers and you're not using wrists and bounce and all of that stuff. And to him that was just a simplification of technique. Which brings me to the next part of this, was he wanted to stick. This is kind of like evenness as well, but we're going to get into straight lines. He wanted the simplest motion. So the stick goes up, the stick goes down, and that's it. There's no need for twisting and, whatever movements that people do. And this is I'm just paraphrasing and giving you my interpretation of what he said. I'm not saying whether I agree with it or not. You make up your own mind. It's about the fact that this individual has come up with their own concept in the way that they want to do it. So he felt that all of this and, molar and all of that was basically just unnecessary, because all he needed to do was lift the stick up and put it down in a straight line. So again, this is straight, even, right? So we're starting to build this little concept here. You've got a firm grip playing out of the back of the hand. Even the left hand was kind of on top with a firm grip, which is very different from some of the other players out there. So then the question comes up of the ride cymbal all the time, the Tony Williams ride cymbal. And he would apply that concept to the ride cymbal and say, well, I want the stick to come straight up and go straight down, and I want it to be even. So when he'd play a, bang ding-a-ling, 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 he wants it to be even. Still swings, but there isn't like a quieter skip note, or the one isn't accented louder than any of the other notes. You want it to be even. And that's how he would work on his ride cymbal. And he would say again, as he's attempting to make this even sound, make the notes even, he also wants the stick to go straight up and straight down, right? And you look at when Tony Williams really gets going, and this grip allows for that as well, Stick can really come back and hit you in the face if you're not careful. So it's all about the stick going straight up and straight down with a firm grip, right? And when he talked about the ride cymbal, he spoke about practicing just the ride cymbal, which any of you that have been to jazz school or been around, have studied jazz and had jazz drummers as teachers and things will know about that. Obviously the ride cymbal in jazz playing is the driver of everything, and it's sort of everything's on top. So it's very important. So yeah, there it is again. Straight lines, evenness, grips firm. There's not this room for things to be bouncing and the stick moving around inside the hand too much. And he also spoke, which I said before, about everything's coming from inside the hand, which might sound like a bit of a difficult. You might go, what does that mean? And it's kind of hard to explain, at least for me. So I would just suggest that you be persistent in giving it a go. And if you apply those things of, the playing out of the back of the hand, the firm grip, the evenness and the straight lines, you'll start to kind of feel this, where you're really playing out of your hand. You're not generating it from a whipping wrist or your elbow or any of this kind of stuff. So we've got that far. Another thing that he would say is that he would never play a bass drum. He liked to play the bass drum on its own. He didn't like to play the bass drum with other things so much, you know. Obviously that, you know, this isn't a all or nothing, you know. There would be times when, of course, with certain grooves it's going to happen. But we'll keep this in the maybe in relation to his solo type playing. So that's an interesting one too. A simple concept. So the bass drum's always in between something. The bass drum's always sounding on its own, in its own space, right? And obviously Tony was famous for all of those hand and foot singles around the drums and stuff like that. With lots of power and speed. A lot of power, yeah. I see guys do that, like it's a standard move, you know. Singles with between your hand and foot. And a lot of guys can do it pretty like fast, but I go, yeah, can I hear it on a drum kit that isn't mic'd up and everything? Because it kind of looks like it's a bit weak. But anyway. So we've got all those things. And just quickly, you've heard this one, but when it came to brush playing, he applied another thing again. And this is going to lead us to where we're going with this, to the next section. 100 kilometres south of the sun here, folks, Queensland, Australia. Summertime. So where were we? Blah, 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 foot. Stuff between the foot. We've done the ride cymbal hands. Oh, that's right. So still on the matter of evenness, he also said his sticks are always the same height. One isn't in front of the other. They're the same. They're even. So once again, we've got this evenness thing happening. Symmetry. And yeah, just quickly, you know, that one of where Tony kind of had a different approach when he played brushes. So when he played brushes, he didn't play any toms, and he didn't play cymbals. He'd only play snare, kick, and some hats. And even it was mostly a lot of snare and kick. And the snares were never on, so the snare wires are always disengaged. No toms, no cymbals. And that was his concept for brushes, because he believed they were something different and they were something special, and so they deserved their own world, their own space. Which also reminds me of another thing that Tony Williams said, where, you know, a lot of drummers, in his experience, you know, they would sit down and play a beat or play a whatever, start soloing, and he's like, but they would never just sit down and play the drums. So there's another one. But what he meant by that was, like, even if you have to take your feet off the pedals, right, just play the drums. See what you can do. You see Tony do all those singles. You know, just toms. Or maybe snare and toms, but just the drums. There's no cymbals, there's no bass drum. So you're actually spending that time just playing toms and playing the drums. And it's interesting, because you'll find all these limbs at first might even be a bit uncomfortable with doing that, and your feet want to jump onto the pedals, or they want to, you just can't help yourself, you know, you want to hit a cymbal or something. And again, evenness. Tony didn't like to play doubles on the toms. liked to play singles. He didn't feel that doubles were good on the toms. So he would only play singles on the toms. So interesting, hey, how that you can see, in a way, you just have to make a decision to start to form these concepts. But at the same time, this came out of doing basically what we're talking about now, where Tony had his certain drum heroes, you know, Max Roach and Roy Haynes, who he would emulate, Philly Joe, you know. And he talked about emulating them and tuning his drums the same and copying all of their stuff and trying to sound exactly like them, not just impressionistically like them, but trying to sound like them. And doing this with many, many drummers, as I'm sure many of you have done. And the idea of this is to, at least in my understanding, this is how you're starting to develop your concept. And how you're doing that is by learning all these things from these other players and copying them and integrating them, or maybe not just yet, but copying them, learning them and finding out what they are. What Tony said was this allowed him to know what he didn't want to play, things that he didn't want to play, you know. So it's just as much about, you know, learning things and then chucking them out as it is about learning them and keeping them. Or maybe you only, you decide to take one little chunk of it that you like, but the rest of it, you know, you're not into. Like, I don't like using the, you know, the classic rock triplet, whichever combo you want, right, left kick, left, right kick. If I am going to play those combinations, I always play them, mostly always play them from the bottom up. So it's kick first always. But even still, I just try to avoid that thing.